Good morning and aloha. Welcome to our annual Nembutsu seminar, and it's a joint one with the Honolulu and Oahu districts. And today's seminar is entitled Nurturing Nembutsu, Cultivating Awareness, which is our Hongwanji 2025 theme and slogan. I'm Debbie Kubota, the Honolulu District Commissioner for Buddhist Education. And we have Stephen Chinen in the back there. He was too shy to come up, but he is the District Commissioner for the Oahu District. We are extremely pleased today to have Noah Rasheta as our speaker, and we're happy to have Noah's family joining us today. We have his wife, Giselle, his son, Raiko, and daughter Gigi, and they also have another daughter who's joining them tomorrow afternoon. So welcome, everyone. By the way, it's their first time in Hawaii, except I know Giselle has been here in her younger days, but it's their first time to Hawaii, so please give them a warm island welcome. So today we have our schedule, just an overview. From 9 to 9:45, Noah will be giving his presentation. We'll have a short break at 9:45 to have refreshments and use the facilities. And then from 10 to 11, we have a Q&A session. So get your questions ready for that Q&A session. So I'd like to now formally introduce Noah Rasheta. He is a Buddhist teacher, a lay minister, and author of No Nonsense Buddhism for Beginners, which is an Amazon #1 bestseller. He is the host of the Secular Buddhism podcast, where he shares down-to-earth teachings that make Buddhist philosophy accessible and practical. Noah's work centers on presence, impermanence, and learning to be with what is without needing to fix or change it. He lives in Oakley, Utah with his wife and 3 children. So again, let's give Noah a warm island welcome. Again, his first time in Hawaii. And by the way, we have people on Zoom, and if their video cameras are on, then we'll be able to see them on the screen. So, Noah? And this is our island.
Testing, all right. Aloha. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for welcoming us here today. To start out, I want to be honest with you. I'm not an expert in Jodo Shinshu. I don't claim to understand all the nuances of your tradition or your particular relationship with Nembutsu. And when I start teaching any concepts or teachings from Buddhism, I usually have 2 mindsets that I like to mention when I'm presenting Buddhist teachings. And the first one is, in my podcast, I always say, don't use what you learn from Buddhism to be a Buddhist, use what you learn to simply be a better whatever you already are. And the other mindset that I like is to think of Buddhist concepts as tools. I've spent years collecting tools from various Buddhist traditions, and tools that have helped me navigate my own messy, beautiful, and ordinary life. And I think of these teachings as a toolkit. You know how you might have a toolbox at home, you might have hammers, you might have screwdrivers, wrenches, a saw, and not every tool works for every job, and not every tool fits every hand comfortably. But the more tools you have and the more you understand how they work, the more skillfully you can respond to whatever life throws at you. So today I wanted to share some of my favorite tools, some of the tools that I keep in my toolbox. And I see these again as frameworks that I think may complement your Nembutsu practice. Take what's useful, leave what isn't, and let's explore together what it means to cultivate something that paradoxically you can't actually force into existence. When I first heard the phrase cultivate Nembutsu, I did feel a little apprehension about how do I wrap my head around the idea of cultivating something that maybe doesn't just happen magically. Because from my own experience, what I've come to understand is when I try to be more aware, like I can't force myself to be more aware. I can't will myself to be more grateful. You can't white knuckle your way into being more peaceful. And I've tried. I would sit down to meditate and try to demand that my mind would settle, and then it would be more agitated that it wasn't settled. I would encounter a difficult situation in life and try to insist that I feel compassion, and instead I would feel anger, and then I would be angry that I'm angry. I would read about all the benefits of gratitude practice and then force myself to start a gratitude list. And then I would feel nothing but resentment at the fact that I was trying to write down all the things I was grateful for. And over time, I felt exhaustion, a little bit of shame maybe that I was failing at something that was supposed to make me feel good. And I was treating my spiritual practice in this sense like I was at war or in a conflict against myself that I had to win against my own mind. And I think that's the paradox that we're going to explore today in the topic I prepared, because just because you can't force something doesn't mean that we're completely powerless. So there's the middle way between trying to control everything and giving up completely, between trying too hard and not trying hard enough, between what we could call self-power and other power. And this matters because how we cultivate or how we relate to our practice determines whether the practice becomes a source of greater peace and liberation or just another thing to be failing at. It determines whether Nembutsu becomes a living, breathing practice that meets us where we are, or it's just another box that we're trying to check off. So I want to offer you today a framework for understanding your role in your own spiritual practice, your role in cultivating awareness, gratitude, presence, that can release you from the trap of forcing and from the trap of just giving up, a way of engaging that honors both your effort and the grace of what's beyond your control. So this is what I like to think of as the garden framework. How do we do this? How do we engage with the practice in a way that's neither forcing nor too passive? Well, have you ever grown a garden? I assume here in Hawaii you can grow a lot of things that we can't where I live. Maybe tomatoes or carrots or pineapples or coconuts. If you haven't had a garden, if you've ever tried to keep a plant alive in your house, then you would know that it takes some effort, right? If we do nothing, the plant dies. So imagine that you decided you want to grow something specific in your garden. Think of the steps that you'll need to take to do that. You're going to need seeds. You're going to need some soil to plant the seeds. But in this process of growing, you can't actually force or make the seed grow, right? You can't stand over it and tell it to, hey, grow faster. Can't do that. Once it starts to grow, you can't stretch it to try to get it to grow faster. We know that that's just not how that works. You can't make a plant grow. The growth happens on its own according to conditions, according to the nature of the seed, according to the forces that are beyond our control. But it is important to understand that you're not completely powerless either. You're not just standing there hoping the universe decides to give you tomatoes. There are things within your control, and what's within our control when we're planting a garden, you can decide where to plant the garden. You can decide what to plant in the garden. You can take the effort to water and prepare the soil. You can spend time pulling the weeds. You might build a fence around the garden to keep animals out. You tend the garden and you care and you consistently show up for what you're trying to cultivate in your garden. And then there are things that are outside of our control: the weather, the climate zone that you live in, the soil composition that's already there, whether that particular seed has the vitality to sprout, the seasons, the rain, the temperature. So the wisdom of a skilled gardener isn't in controlling everything. It's in knowing the difference between the two domains of what is in my control and what is out of my control. A skilled gardener doesn't waste energy or time yelling at the clouds because it's about to rain. They also don't neglect the garden thinking, well, it's up to nature anyway. I guess I don't have to do anything, right? There's the balance between the two. So they work with reality, not against reality. And here's how I want to connect this to Nembutsu practice. I think Nembutsu practice is like tending a garden of awareness. It's the garden of our own mind. So we can't force ourselves to feel grateful. We can't manufacture genuine peace, but we can create conditions where these states are more likely to arise naturally. Maybe the recitation itself, Namu Amida Butsu, might be one of those conditions. Not because saying the words magically creates awareness, but because the practice of returning, of remembering, of reciting creates space for awareness to bloom on its own. And you're not the one making it grow, but you are the one tending the garden where it can grow. So the 4 practices that I wanted to present on this topic of the garden of our mind are preventing, abandoning, cultivating, and maintaining. And preventing is like building the fences, abandoning is like pulling the weeds, cultivating, planting seeds, and maintaining is the watering and tending of the garden. So what does this garden, what does tending the garden actually look like? What are the specific practices? I want to share these 4 with you individually. So starting with the first one, with preventing. This is about proactively protecting the conditions for awareness. It's like building a fence around the garden to keep the rabbits out or the deer. Do you have deer here? Where we live, we have a lot of deer. But you know, it's what you're setting up to protect what you're trying to grow, what you're cultivating. And I want to be clear, this isn't about controlling reality. You can't control whether deer or rabbits exist. You can't eliminate the challenges that life is going to bring, but you can create skillful or wise boundaries that protect the space that you're trying to cultivate. So an example of this, maybe you've noticed that if you wake up and you check your phone first thing in the morning, you get on the news or social media, then maybe that sets you up to feel a little anxious, you know, starting early on in the day, or unsettled for the rest of the day. You can't control what's happening in the world. You can't control what shows up on the news, but you can control if and when you want to expose yourself to it. So maybe a fence there would be, I'm going to charge my phone in another room. Or when I wake up, I'm going to do my Nembutsu practice or spend 5 minutes, you know, doing contemplation or something before I jump into the chaos of what my phone is about to present me. That would be an example of the fence. Or maybe you know you're going to have a difficult conversation with a family member that tends to push your buttons. You can't control how they're going to respond, but you can control how you want to go into that conversation before going into it. You might set an intention. You remind yourself, I'm going to listen. I will stay present, but I'm going to avoid reacting to everything they say. That would be another example of the fence. And then there's another teaching I want to introduce here, which is a tool that comes from another tradition. This is from the 8th century monk Shantideva. And the story of this teaching goes like this. Imagine you want to walk across a land covered in thorns and sharp stones. And you have 2 options. You could try to cover the entire earth in leather to smooth out every surface, to eliminate every danger. Or you could put in the effort to use that leather to cover the soles of your own feet. And which of those 2 would be more practical? Where would we ever find enough leather to cover the entire earth? And yet, I think unintentionally, we do sometimes spend a lot of our lives trying to cover the earth in leather. We think, if I could just get everyone to behave the way I think they should behave, if I could just control all the circumstances in my life, if only nothing difficult would come my way. But that's impossible, and quite frankly, it's exhausting. The wisdom is in putting leather on your own feet, developing your own resilience, your own boundaries, and your own capacity to walk through difficulty without being destroyed by it. And here's how this connects to Nembutsu. Your practice doesn't change the thorns of the world. It doesn't eliminate the challenges. It changes how you walk through them. It's the leather on your feet. And maybe reciting Namu Amida Butsu is your fence. It's your moment of refuge before the day's chaos begins. Not to control what the day will bring, you can't do that, but to set the conditions for meeting the day with awareness, with presence, and with greater intention. The next practice of gardening the mind is abandoning. You could think of this as pulling the weeds. And here, think of this as abandoning unskillful thoughts that are not conducive to growing the healthy garden you're trying to grow. This is about noticing what's unhelpful and then gently withdrawing your attention from it. It's not suppression of thoughts, it's recognition of thoughts. If you think about a garden, no matter what you do with a garden, weeds will appear, right? That's just the reality of having a garden. You didn't invite them, you don't want them, but they're there. They're going to show up. So the question isn't, how do I prevent weeds from ever showing up in my garden? No, the question is, what do I do when I notice a weed in my garden? A skilled gardener doesn't fight with the fact that weeds exist. They're not going to yell at the weeds. They're not going to feel ashamed that there are weeds in the garden because they recognize that's what happens. Weeds show up where you don't want them. The skilled gardener simply recognizes the weed for what it is, and then will either gently remove it or at the very least stop watering it. Water the plants that you do want to grow. And here's another teaching I like to correlate to this overall notion, and that's the teaching of the two arrows. The Buddha taught that when something painful happens, it's like being struck with an arrow. The first arrow is the actual event. It's you get sick, that's the first arrow. Someone criticizes you, there's the first arrow. You lose something precious. But it's once this first arrow hits, there's really nothing you can do about it. You've been hit. But that's when the second arrow shows up. This is the one that we shoot at ourselves. The second arrow represents our reaction to the first arrow. This is the story we tell about what just happened. It's the resistance, the blame, the feeling of why me, the catastrophizing, the rumination. And a common example I share here is when you're driving and someone cuts you off in traffic, that's the first arrow. It happened. Yes, it was startling. Maybe it was even dangerous. The event itself probably took, 2 or 3 seconds of your life? But then comes the second arrow. You think to yourself, that person is a jerk. People have no respect anymore. And this is how it happens. This always happens to me, or this just ruined my whole morning. You carry that thought with you, thinking, I bet they did this on purpose. And then the event is actually over. It's been over for a long time, but maybe you're still bleeding from that second arrow hours later as you're telling your coworkers about it, or when you get home and you're still in a bad mood over the 3-second incident that happened that morning. So the first arrow was 2 seconds. The second arrow could last all day. And with other things in life, the second arrow could last weeks, months, years. And here's what the practice of abandoning or weeding looks like. First, you distinguish between the two arrows. Try to get really good at recognizing what is the first arrow and what is a second, or if we're honest, third, fourth, fifth, 29th arrow. To distinguish and to allow ourselves to just sit with the discomfort of the first arrow. And something I like to notice, the second arrow typically appears when we create a story around why that happened. The car is a good example. We want to say this person is a jerk, but we actually don't know that. Maybe they were on their way to the hospital. Maybe they were distracted on their phone because they just got an alert that their house is on fire, or it could be anything. The point is we don't know, but we're not comfortable with uncertainty. We would rather be very certain that that person is a jerk. And there we go. And there's our second arrow. So when you catch yourself in the middle of that story and you recognize, oh, this is a weed and I'm watering it, that's a good moment to say, okay, I don't know why this happened, but it happened, and I don't need to replay it. That's not helping. And you don't have to yell at yourself for having that thought. You don't have to feel ashamed that you reacted the way that you did or that you feel the anger that you feel. You just, you just say, this is a weed, and you gently withdraw your attention from it. You stop watering it and you bring your focus back to something else. Maybe focus on what is the feeling of the steering wheel in your hands? What are the lyrics I'm hearing on the radio right now, or anything else? And then that connects to another teaching that I really like from the Tibetan tradition. And this is the concept called Shenpa. Shenpa is the state that we feel when we're hooked, when the mind is hooked. And I like the visual of a fish, because we all know what happens there when the fish takes that bite, right? Shenpa is the moment when something hooks you. And you know the feeling when someone says something and you feel that sudden tightness in your chest, that rush of heat, that narrowing of focus into this one moment. That's the moment you're hooked. And before even realizing what's happening, you're reacting, you're defending, you're attacking, you're spiraling. These are all symptoms of Shenpa, being hooked. And that moment, the instant of being hooked, that's Shenpa. It's the split second before you grasp the thought and then you run with it, or you let it run with you. And here's the practice. What if the moment that you sense or recognize that hook, that tightening, that reactivity, what if that becomes the moment you call to Nembutsu? That becomes the moment that you bring your awareness back to your practice, not as a way to escape and not as a spiritual bypassing of the present moment, but as an anchoring to the present moment. To say, yes, this is happening, and what else am I experiencing? What else am I noticing? I'm hooked right now. I can feel that, but I don't have to follow this hook. I don't need this line to pull me. Maybe that Namu Amida Butsu is the reminder that I'm here. This is happening, and I don't need to bite down any longer on this hook. Recognizing the weed, choosing not to water it, and if you notice that you've already been watering it, then stop watering it. It's recognizing the hook, not taking the bite. And if you already took the bite and you're hooked, then it's saying, okay, I want to release this hook, and I don't want to continue being pulled in the direction of that line. Then we have the third practice, which is cultivating. So here, this is where we become active participants in what grows in our garden. This is about intentionally choosing, what do we want to plant? What do I want to grow in my garden? And remembering, we're not forcing anything to grow. We're planting seeds and creating conditions. The growth itself, that's still beyond our control, but we do have a choice about what we plant. And that brings me to another analogy that I use all the time, because I think it fundamentally shifts how we understand life and our relationship with life. At least it did for me. And this is the recognition that most of us have gone through life, or maybe go through life, thinking that we're playing the game of chess. That, chess, it's about strategy, it's about planning. You think several moves ahead. If you can anticipate what your opponent is doing, our opponent in this case is life or the universe, then you believe, if I'm just smart enough, if I could just be strategic enough, I can control the outcome of the game. I can win this. But the truth is, life isn't chess. Life is like Tetris. In Tetris, pieces just appear. You don't know which piece is coming next. You can't control when it shows up or what shows up. A long piece when you wanted the square piece, or the L shape when you wanted the plus sign, right? The different shapes that show up. But you're not completely powerless either, because when the shapes show up, you do have a little bit of control. You can move it side to side. You can rotate it. You can manipulate how fast it drops. Your job is to work skillfully with whatever piece arises, whatever piece appears. And I think that is life. That is much more like life. We don't get to choose which pieces show up. We don't get to plan out the sequence in what order the pieces show up. We just get what we get moment by moment and piece by piece. And the wisdom is in becoming skillful at working with whatever piece shows up. And here's how this connects to the garden. In gardening, you can't control what climate you live in. If you live in Utah, where I do, we're not growing coconuts. I can plant the coconuts, they're not going to grow. But I can choose, we can choose what makes sense to plant in our garden given the circumstances of where we live. I could plant cucumbers. I could plant several different kinds of berries. So you work with the climate that you have instead of fighting against it. That is the difference between recognizing what is in my control and what is out of my control. That's part of cultivation. So for us in the garden of our mind, we can ask ourselves, what am I planting? What seeds am I consciously choosing to nurture? Maybe you've noticed you have a tendency or a propensity towards pessimism. You naturally see what's wrong, what's missing, what could go wrong. Well, maybe that's just your conditioning. That's the climate you've inherited, whether that's cultural upbringing or family dynamics, but that's the climate you've inherited. You didn't choose it, and you can't just suddenly decide to be different and say, okay, well, I'm not going to be like that anymore. It doesn't really work that way. But you can plant seeds of a new propensity, gratitude, for example. Again, not by forcing yourself to be grateful, but by creating conditions to feel gratitude. For example, maybe every evening before going to bed, I'm just going to list 3 things that went well that day. And by recognizing what went well, maybe gratitude is what I will experience naturally now because I'm aware of what went well. It may seem silly at first, but that's how it works. We cultivate new conditions to allow these things to arise naturally. That's planting a seed. And you're not making gratitude bloom instantly by doing that. You're creating the conditions for it to naturally arise over time. Or maybe you notice that you have a tendency towards harshness toward yourself or toward others. Again, you can't just flip the switch and say, oh, I'm going to be a kind person now. That would be nice. You could pretend to be kind, but that's not helpful. You want to recognize what is the propensity or the tendency that I have, and let me work with reality. But then you could try, okay, well, I'm going to adopt a new practice to try to offer one genuine compliment to someone. And that becomes a new habit that you start to form. Or I'm going to listen to my friend today without offering any advice. I'm just going to be present for my friend. So each small act is a new seed that we plant in our garden. And here's where Nembutsu comes in. Each time you recite, you're planting a seed. You're not forcing awareness to bloom in the second as you say it, but you are creating the conditions. You're showing up to tend the garden of the mind. And each moment, each Tetris piece that shows up for you in life, that becomes a new opportunity for the practice. So the difficult conversation that just showed up, or the unexpected change of plans that just showed up, that Tetris piece that you didn't want, that is the opportunity. That could be the reminder that, okay, this is the piece that's here. This is what I'm working with. This moment is whole and complete just as it is. Doesn't mean I like it, but this is what is, and I can work with it. That is cultivation. It's intentional, it's active, but it's not forcing either. And then we have maintaining, the fourth practice. This might be the most important one because this is where most of us with time will either burn out or give up. And here's the truth about gardens. They're never done, right? They're never, ever done. It's you don't plant once and then say, okay, well, now I'll just enjoy the garden for the rest of my life. Like once you start to garden, you're a gardener. And that means you're out there doing the work of gardening. Gardening is ongoing. Weeds will come back. Plants need consistent watering. The nature of the entire process is cyclical, it's seasonal, and it's continual. And here's the other truth. Nobody else is coming to tend your garden for you. It's your garden, and you are the gardener of your own mind. And sometimes this can feel overwhelming, but it can also feel empowering, and maybe sometimes both. The key is finding what the Buddha called the middle way. And a beautiful analogy about this is the teaching about the lute string. He said that effort should feel like tuning the string of a lute, an ancient guitar-like musical instrument. If you tighten that string too much, it snaps. That's burnout. That's white knuckling your practice. It's forcing and pushing and demanding the results. If you leave the string too loose, it's not going to make sound, right? That's complacency. That's giving up the practice because we think, oh, it's all grace anyway, or what's the point? I have no power in this. But there's a sweet spot in the middle, just enough tension to make music, and our practice can look like that. It means showing up regularly, but not burning out. It means being consistent, but not too rigid on ourselves. It means having compassion for yourself when life gets in the way. Maybe you have a meditation practice or a daily Nembutsu practice, and one day you're tired, you're exhausted, you're overwhelmed, and you're barely holding it together. Well, that day, instead of thinking, well, if I can't do my full practice, then I'm not doing it at all. No, maybe you could just say, you know what, today I'm going to do it a little less. Instead of instead of 20 minutes, I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes. Or, I'm going to sit here for 60 seconds today. Or instead of reciting 30 times, maybe I'll just do 3 times today. Whatever it is. But the thing is, the consistency. You're showing up. You're returning. It's not about the perfection of the practice. It's about the consistency of the practice. It's not the intensity either. It's the persistence of showing up. This is how the garden stays alive, not through heroic efforts, spend 4 hours gardening today and now abandon it for a month. That's not how that works. It's through short periods, but regular and sustainable maintenance. And now I want to share with you what for me has been probably the most important concept in my own practice. And this is the concept of groundlessness. And it's changed the way that I practice and interact with life itself. So I want you to imagine this scenario with me for a moment. Just imagine that you're standing at the edge of a bottomless abyss. You look down there and there's no ground. And then as you're standing there, you feel the earth start to shake. You lose your balance, and suddenly, before you know it, boom, you fall in. You're falling into the abyss. Your body goes into panic mode. Every instinct screams, grab something, anything. You're flailing, you're desperate, and there falling next to you is a big rock. So you grab the rock and you wrap your arms around it and you hold it with everything you have, because this feeling of falling is scary, but at least I'm not falling alone. I've got my big rock. And for a moment, you feel relief. I'm safe. I've got something solid to hold on to. I'm okay. But then you notice, well, I'm still falling. The rock is falling with you. It's not saving you. It's just falling alongside you. And you could actually start to get exhausted from clutching the rock that's actually not doing much for you. And here's the recognition that I think changes everything, is that this is a description of the reality of being alive. It's not just that we're falling or that we might fall. It's that nothing was ever truly solid. If you zoom out and you realize, oh, there was never any solid ground beneath me in the first place. I just didn't notice it because I'm on the rock that's big enough that I thought this was my firm foundation and my solid ground. And that's what we do sometimes. And we don't notice the illusion of solid ground. Well, so what are these rocks that we're on, the ones that we grasp? I can tell you, for me, I've had different ones at different stages of life. Our identity rocks. For me, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a helicopter pilot. We clutch these things desperately, terrified of who would I be without my rock? Our relationship rocks. Well, this is going to last forever, or I don't need to tend this relationship. This person would never do anything to hurt me. Our financial rocks. Once I have enough money, then everything's going to be great. Then I'll feel safe. Our belief system rocks. Oh, I have the one and only rock. I know what life is all about. I've got it all figured out. Our opinion rocks, our views rocks, our I'm right and they're wrong rocks. Even our spiritual practice. If I could just meditate enough, then everything would be okay. And we grasp these rocks. And here's the thing about these rocks is that sometimes these rocks have sharp edges. Sometimes they're painful. They cut us because of the way that we're clutching them. We don't realize that that toxic relationship or that unhealthy relationship that we won't leave because at least it's familiar. That's the way that we clutch these things, or that soul crushing job that we just won't quit because at least it provides stability, or that belief system that just doesn't fit anymore, but we're too scared to let go because what will I hold on to if I let go of this? In all these cases, we end up choosing familiar pain and suffering over the uncertain freedom of letting go. So what changes when we recognize that we're in the free fall? When we realize there's no firm ground beneath us and that no one's coming to save us? Maybe this, we stop clutching the rocks with the death grip. It's still there. It's still falling next to you. You might even still hold it and say, yeah, I find this rock to be comforting, so I'll still hold it, but I don't have to have a death grip on it. I can hold it loosely or lightly because I know this rock isn't saving me. It just happens to be falling with me. And maybe, just maybe, we start to realize that the falling is never a problem anyway. It's okay. Yes, we're falling. We're all falling. That is the nature of understanding groundlessness and the sense of uncertainty. Like the Tetris game, we don't know what piece is coming up next. I don't need anyone to save me from the game and say, here, I can guarantee you these are the pieces you'll get if you do this, or you'll avoid these pieces if you do that. This is life. Life has always been like this. And I think this is where a practice like Nembutsu becomes profound. When there's no ground to stand on, when there's nothing solid to grasp, and you realize that you're in a perpetual free fall, and you always have been, maybe Nembutsu becomes the radical acceptance of the fall itself, of the fact that you're in a free fall. It's not another rock you need to grasp desperately. It's not a rope that's going to pull you to safety. It's a reminder. The reminder is, yeah, I'm falling, and that's okay. I don't need saving from the fall. I'm falling. The grace isn't being saved from the fall. The grace is accepting that you are in the fall, that you always have been, and that's the nature of reality. And that Namu Amida Butsu is, I take refuge, not in the solid ground that isn't there, but in the moment, in this breath, in this Tetris piece, in whatever life is giving me in this moment. And that's the practice of maintenance with the garden, the consistent returning to Nembutsu. It isn't about achieving some stable state. It's about remembering again and again that you never needed that stability in the first place, that you've been okay all along. Yes, you're falling. We all are. That's the nature of reality, is that we're in a free fall. And then to bring this all together, I want to share one more framework with you that I think ties a lot of this together. And this comes from internal family systems, which is a psychology framework and therapy. But you can imagine, I think it ties well with the Buddhist teaching of the nature of self, that there isn't a permanent independent self that endures. So imagine you're driving a car and you're the one that is behind the wheel, cruising down the road of life, but you're not alone. You've got passengers, and these passengers represent the different aspects or parts of you. These are feelings, emotions, propensities. Your anxiety, for example, that's a passenger. The anger, that's a passenger. Fear, joy, wisdom, shame, these are all passengers that are in the overall vehicle that we sense as this me. This is me, right? And most of the time, you're driving along just fine, but then something happens. The Tetris piece shows up, and then that passenger in the back seat that's anxiety or anger from some past event lunges forward and grabs that wheel for a moment, and suddenly you're not the one in control anymore. Maybe that's your anxiety, and it's saying, let me steer. I need to control what's happening right now, because if I don't take over, something terrible is going to happen. And maybe it's because something terrible happened once, and it's saying, we're not going to let that happen again. Maybe it's your anger. Move over. Someone needs to be punished for this. Let me take over. And before you know it, that passenger has their hands on the wheel. You're swerving all over the road, heading in directions you did not intend to be heading toward. And here's the question that I think Nembutsu invites you to ask in that moment. When you say the Nembutsu, think, who is saying this right now? Who's controlling this vehicle? Which passenger has their hands on the wheel at this particular moment? Is this the anxious part of me that's just grasping for control? Is this the exhausted part of me that just wants someone or something to come save me? Is this, or is this just me acknowledging the present moment right now? And this isn't about judginess. This is, or judging. This is about awareness. This is about recognizing, oh, anxiety, that's you back there. I see that you just reached up and you're grabbing the wheel. Okay, it's okay. Take a seat. I'll take over the wheel again. We're good. We're safe. And then with compassion, not with force, you remove their hands from the wheel. You can say, thank you for trying to keep us safe. I know what you're trying to do. But you can just take a seat in the back. We're good now. And this is the practice, that all passengers are welcome in the vehicle. You don't kick out the anxious one. You don't banish the fearful one. You don't exile the angry one, because they're all you. They're all here falling with you. They're all trying their best with whatever rock they've grabbed onto. But you can influence who's got their hands on the wheel when you notice what's actually happening. And that is where Nembutsu becomes this moment of spaciousness to allow all of it, to recognize this is what's happening. We're all in this together, all these parts of me, and that's okay. I have room for all of it. So just to sum it up, here we are at the end of our time together. You've got these 4 practices where prevent is like building your fences. Abandon, pulling the weeds, or at least stop watering them. Cultivate is where you plant the seeds, and maintain is to tend your garden consistently. And you've got these new frameworks to think about. You're a gardener working with conditions, not controlling them, not controlling everything. Life is a game of Tetris, not a game of chess. You're in a free fall, and that's perfectly okay. You are your passengers. But you can help decide who's got their hands on the wheel at any given moment. And I hope you'll be able to take some of these ideas and frameworks with you into your day-to-day lives, and find a new approach to how the Nembutsu shows up for you in your daily practice. And as a final thought here, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to these ideas, to these concepts. I've always felt that if the world will ever change, it's because we individuals have the intention to try to change ourselves. We can't go out and just make the world change with a magic wand, but I can reduce the amount of unnecessary suffering that I feel, or the anger or the frustration that I might feel inside of me. And the more peaceful I am, the more peaceful my home is. And wow, this is the first time I've given a talk with my family, by the way. So seeing my family and realizing that's why this matters to me, because I want to be the best whatever I already am. And I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a lot of things. And I want to be the best whatever I already am. And that can ripple out, because I know it gives them the chance to have a more peaceful family dynamic. We just had this experience actually this weekend of a cousin going through like kind of chaos at home, and I had the thought, I'm so grateful that in our home we do a pretty good job. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but everyone feels loved in our home. Everyone feels perfectly fine the way that they are. That's part of the ripples that go out, and then that changes how you were on the road that day, which might change how you handled the car that cut you off, which, you know, ripples out from there. And that's where these ripples make a difference. So the ripples out into the world, ways that we might never even have thought of or never even have seen. So from you to your family, to your community, to society, and maybe just one day, that is what changes the world. So thank you for your time, and Namu Amida Butsu.
Thank you so much, Noah, for that wonderful presentation. And don't go away because we have a question and answer period right after this, but we will take a short break. Let's come back together at 10:05. Thank you. Okay, I guess we're ready to start back up again. So first of all, I wanted to have Dave help us. There were some really nice comments made by some of the attendees on Zoom. And so we wanted everyone to see those comments. And for those of you on Zoom, we would like you to join in the question and answer session, but please remember to keep yourselves muted unless you're asking a question. But I'll let Dave go ahead and start.
Okay, Debbie, maybe I'll do that from back here. Just this is where I'll be reading from. So let me swap the camera. Okay, hi everyone. So here is some very nice comments that people have shared. Okay, Pete said, standing ovation for Noah. Mahalo, David, for the excellent Zoom coverage. Thank you, Pete. Making it possible, and Miles, of course, making it possible for those who cannot come or can watch later. And then Dennis Tashiro says, excellent speaker and message. I enjoyed all of the analogies he used to clarify and simplify his message. I think I do have a garden. Now I must care for it. The person whose Zoom name is Higuchi said, great analogies. This was American Buddhism at its best, and I could relate to the talk as it related to our culture and life in America. Thank you. And then Michael Nishimoto said, this is the kind of seminar I had hoped for. It is applied Buddhism. So, excellent. Thank you all for your comments, and I'm sure Noah is very pleased to hear how you're receiving it.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you to the Zoom participants for the wonderful comments. And so we had some pre-submitted questions when you registered, and the first question, the person who submitted this, I don't see her online, but her question to Noah was, are you teaching any regular courses online, and where can I register?
Okay, so the question about courses online, I do have 2 courses that are available on my website on secularbuddhism.com. I have a community, and in the community space, that's where you would find these 2 courses. The first one is the fundamentals, that covers like all the core fundamental concepts from Buddhism. And then I have a second one that's called the Inner Peace Roadmap. And that one's a little bit more in-depth into some of the concepts and ideas with an application of how does it apply with what we understand about psychology as well. And those are both on secularbuddhism.com.
I'll let you guys. Okay, great. Thank you. So the next question is from Pete Doctor, and I know he's joined us online. Ooh. Pete, do you want to ask your own question from Zoom?
Okay. If you can bear with me though, and it seems like, no, I really grateful. I haven't seen a speaker give so much time to questions and answers, which really says a lot about you're here for the people and not for yourself. Really grateful for that. So if you could bear with me, as was noted, you do this great work with analogies. which simplify complex things, right, into bite-sized pieces. And so what I would like to do, my question is, how to maybe work backwards with some of those analogies to some solutions, because you offer practical guidance for on a personal basis, but we're not just individuals, right? We are interdependent. And um, so Shanti Deva's analogy about the leather, right, and versus shoes, got me thinking about what happens. Bear with me, because this is where I'm trying to make this analogy a little bit more applicable to the present moment. What happened in a world where there's a king in this world who says, we must leather the world. We must protect ourselves from all discomfort, right? And he systematically says, we're going to leather the world. Vote for me. And it's a world where not everybody has shoes. Some people are fortunate, have plenty more than enough shoes, but in this world, most people don't have shoes. So they start depending on the system and king, who's leathering the world, which we know the analogy point is that is completely unsustainable. The idea of leathering the amount of resources and extraction from the people and the planet that we're required to do that is just, what happens is it creates this system where people are so dependent on the king to provide the leather, right? So I'm trying to paint this picture where we're all sucked into this systematic world of this leathered world, in various forms. We can call capitalism here and that, as we know, there's a goal of no part of this planet will be left untouched. So this analogy is very apropos, right, to this insatiable appetite for capital and markets, right, that we're all sucked into. We can have this great conversation. I'm so grateful to be able to watch this at Zoom at home, but I'm also aware of the resources that it took on the cost on the planet that is leaving for our grandchildren's grandchildren, right? And so my question is, like, what would Shanti Deva's analogy be now? That how do we change the system of the leathering the world? Because like the analogy with the shoes is like we can cover our own feet, right? And that's fine and good, but is self-preservation alone enough? Is it enough to just like, oh, well, my feet are covered, so I'm good, tough for my neighbor, my kids, whatever, we know that's not sufficient. So that's where I'm kind of getting with this analogy, because so many things you said, like, have reminded how, like, you're used to the analogy with farming. Sorry, I'm making another point here, but I wanted to focus on that question about how do we work backwards from these problems we get sucked into. If I may say a point about the self-preservation, so maybe you can comment on it, is if I may share a practice of mine that's been helping me get through difficult times, is I try not to be in denial and avoidance of the world, as horrible as what's going on. I know there's some level of responsibility to have awareness, to cultivate awareness of the what's going on in our neighborhoods, the suffering and the joys. But that leads to burnout, and it's overwhelming and depressing. And I went through that process. So now I find myself, a regular practice for me is when I hear the latest mass shooting or the last kids and medical workers in Gaza murdered, I go to the Nembutsu. It's like I feel like it's a life preserver to get me through these rocky waters, because I'm just going to get empathy burnout at this point. It's too overwhelming. And so that's getting me through that discomfort, the rough waters myself. But again, I'm not worried just about myself. I want to take care of my family too. I heard you, brother, when, I felt you when you're talking about your family. That's your ikigai, and you could feel that. So that's where I feel the same passion, that protecting my own feet's not enough. And so what thoughts do you have in a practical matter of undoing this, getting caught in this net that we're all kind of like, you use the word complacent. And I think that's very apropos. How do we not be complacent and start repairing and take, as opposed to letting the king, because I think one of the things, like you said, we have little control. There's some things, but there are conditions that we can help cultivate, right? And so that's what I'm kind of getting to, is how do we create the conditions to turn the ship around? Because I think, some people think we're in the right direction, but most of the suffering planet would confirm that's not. And I think ultimately the health of our planet, so apropos to talk about rocks, because we're extracting so much energy from rocks, and just we seem like with the attitude that we have an abundance of rocks, right? Which people who live on islands don't have that mentality. They only have so many rocks on this island, and we walk that way. It's maybe no coincidence. Rocks, Pohaku and Hawaiian, are considered sacred. But anyway, so I know that was a lot, but I was some context of which I threw a really tough question to you.
Yes, thank you for bringing up what you brought up with the questions. There's a lot there, a lot to unpack. One thing that comes to mind, if you're familiar with the Better Angels of Our Nature, a book, talks about the overall perspective of the moral arc of humanity. If we look at it zooming out for the big picture, think back to Genghis Khan days, to today, that arc bends towards justice. In other words, it's hard to see at times, but it's getting better, comparatively. I like to remember that in this big zoomed out picture of the existence of life, here I am in a tiny sliver, experiencing a tiny sliver of this time frame. And even within that, I recognize that in my own life, the seasonality of, there are times when I can go out and spend time in my garden, and there are times where I can't do anything about the garden because I'm laying in bed sick or, tending to something more important. So getting to what you're asking about, an analogy that works backwards more or less, the way I like to think of it with this garden analogy is that there are times with the seasonality of gardening that, maybe today my focus is to keep the one plant in my office alive, because the garden, we're in the middle of a dust bowl and it's just, there's nothing I can do about that. One day we won't be in that dust bowl. So it's doing what you can, when you can, how you can, within the scope that it makes sense, and then not allowing that weight to prevent you from doing anything at all. For example, if I had a thriving garden and now it's spread and now it's the whole yard, and then now I'm working on the neighbor's yard, and then life comes and new season and it's all dying, it's like, well, now I can't do everything that I was doing. Should I just give it up entirely? No, that might be a time that I say, okay, well, now my garden is this big. This is what I focus on. So I think what helps me in these moments, as you think about the world and all the things that are happening in the world and what can I do, how much can I do, and where, that is always going to change. The answer will always be it depends, and also I don't know. Because it's like, I'll try this. Oh, that's not working. Okay, I'll try this. So be willing to adapt and say, this is what my practice is right now. And that might be different tomorrow or a week from now. And looking back, you can see that. My practice today is different than my practice a year ago or a practice 5 years ago. So just having that flexibility with gardening, you recognize first it's an ongoing thing. So I'm going to do whatever makes sense to do now. One day it might mean it's this one plant. On another day it might mean I've got a whole garden of plants. That's what helps me, because I realize I'm always doing something. I'm never going to just say, all right, then, if I can't do anything to influence the world, then I won't do anything at all. That feels disheartening. I feel like, well, at any given moment I can always say, what am I doing with me internally, my own work? And that might be the only garden. At another stage of life, the garden extends to, it's also my kids or my family, but it's always something. So I don't know if that answers that, but I have found for me, the mindset isn't, I'm going to fix or change. I'm always going to do something, whatever that something is. I'm always trying to find what is skillful at this moment given these specific circumstances. But I'm going to do something.
So it's almost like instead of accepting algorithms forced upon us, is we run by our own algorithm. You know, what like you said, what you can do at the moment, what's right at the moment. Yeah. Gracias, hermano. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a pre-submitted question from Ed, Windward Buddhist Temple.
Thanks, Debbie. Yeah, I sent the question because I guess like so many of us, I've always felt driven to save the world. And that's a bit narcissistic, I think. But my Buddhist practice has helped me temper that. And you have described that experience, I think, very well, trying to impact just within your own Sangha or perhaps in your own family or just yourself. And that these large global concerns, I don't know that I'll live long enough at 72 years of age to fix the world. So I have to humble myself a bit and realize that my work is maybe here today in this room or this afternoon. But the question that I submitted is one that causes me anxiety in a positive way, I think. And that is everywhere I go of late, since I became a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist 5 years ago, I gravitated from more of a Tibetan school of Buddhism and followed Pema Chodron for years and years and years, and was comforted by that, but I never had a temple until I moved to Kailua across the Ko'olaus and joined this temple. And it's just the richest experience I've ever had in my life. The love and embracement of me walking through the door up to this very moment is so much a part of what we as practicing Buddhists derive from being connected. And my anxiety to that point is in our temple, like most temples, like most churches, whether they be Christian, Muslim, all of the religions, have a crisis in how do we in this age draw young people to the rich support and of values of becoming Buddhist. You know, if I could go out with a placard and stand on the street corner and say, "Hey, come to my temple," maybe that would be a little crazy, but I saw, the reason why I submitted the question was I saw that in the flyers about your coming to Oahu, that you, I think, made a presentation at the university. Mm-hmm. And so I'm assuming there were young people there. So I'd like to know your thoughts on this challenge before all of our Buddhist temples and the world's religions, perhaps, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So I'll share something unrelated that's related. My hobby and passion is paragliding. I love paragliding. The first time I took off on a paraglider and was flying along the cliffs, and I don't usually tell people this because it sounds crazy, but I thought, this is how I want to die. I remember thinking that. That's how much I loved the feeling of flying in the air. And at the same time, I know there are people who are terrified at the thought of flying through the air and would probably never do it. And it occurred to me early on, this is my thing. It doesn't have to be anyone else's thing. And as I've gone through living that hobby, I've never resented that my wife doesn't do it with me. I've never tried to force any of my friends in it. And yet some of them have said, you know, you've been doing this a while. I see the pictures. I want to try it. And some of them have done it, and they say, oh, I love this too. And now they do it with me. But I bring that up because I feel like when we find the thing that really fulfills us, the most compassionate thing that we could do is not force it on anyone else. And say, this is my thing. It brings me tremendous joy. And if you were afraid of heights, it would be detrimental for you to feel that pressure of me saying, you're missing out on this. You really need to do it, because maybe it's not at all for you, and it wouldn't give you at all the sensation that it gives me. When I encountered Buddhism, it was a very similar feeling of what I felt paragliding. It was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what my mind thinks like this. It works, everything clicked. And it felt like I had found home, the same way I feel at home in the air. But I didn't want to force it on my family. I didn't want to force it on my close friends. It was kind of like, well, this is a new thing that I'm really enjoying. And it has permeated, some of the ideas have permeated, and because I share it the way that I do, like I mentioned, the start of every episode that I do of a podcast says, don't use this to be a Buddhist, use it to be a better whatever you are. I genuinely feel that and approach it that way. And that gives people permission to approach it without any pressure and see if they like it. And for some people, it has done exactly what it did for me. They're like, oh my gosh, this is the home I've been looking for. And I feel like my podcast and my community has grown because of that approach. Now, with young people, I think it's even more important to give that leeway to feel like, hey, this is something you could sample and maybe it'll click for you. I know a lot of us who encounter Buddhism later in life, if we didn't grow up with it, it's because we've gone through a difficulty of some sort. The 84,000 gates. There are different ways people will encounter it, and for a lot of us, it's suffering is the first gate. Something intense happens, you're trying to alleviate that suffering, and then you encounter an entire worldview based around the understanding of suffering. It's like, hey, this is actually great. So to answer the question, what do we do with the youth? I think we present what works for us in a way that we're saying, this is why I love this. I post all my pictures and videos of paragliding, not to say, look what you're missing out on. I do it to say, look what I get to experience. And some people will reach out and adopt paragliding as a new form of a hobby because they have no clue what it would feel like. But they can see from my videos my perspective. I've always been of the mindset that let me show you what I'm seeing, not let me show you what the selfie style where it's like, look at me. I don't want them to see me flying. I want them to see what I'm seeing. So my videos are always out. It's like, look at that cliff, look at the, but I think that's what allows them to picture themselves, what if I was there seeing that from that perspective? And I feel like if we take Buddhism or the concepts from Buddhism from that approach, like, let me show you what I'm seeing, you might see yourself in that, say, I want to see the world that way too. And that's how I've approached my podcast. And it's had a lot of growth in that space with a lot of young people. In fact, I had a retreat a couple weeks ago, and it was really neat to see, like, that from 22 all the way up, like just the full range, very well spread out. And I thought, this is really neat, the coming together of a diverse group of people of all ages because of the way that it's being shared. So, yeah, I don't know that there's a specific, maybe the answer is that there isn't a thing that we can do. We just live it in the most authentic way that we can and let it be what it is. And the people who are looking for it will find it. So, thank you.
Yes, great answer. Online, we have a question from Katie Kaufman. Katie, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. Thank you, Noah, for a really great talk. I had a thought I want to share on your second point of pulling the weeds or abandoning basically your ego. I just wanted to share that I was able to learn a really effective way to do that when I studied with a Tibetan Lama who lived here in Honolulu, Lama Rinchen, for many, many years. And he would ask us when we were stuck in our emotions, or we were stuck like, oh, I've been a victim, this horrible thing happened to me, and he would gently ask, he said, well, can you consider that the complete opposite might also be equally true? And I have found that to be one of the most helpful things in my toolkit because it very quickly detaches the ego, because amazingly, no matter how victimized I might feel or how overwhelmed, it's amazing. I can actually sit and think of the complete opposite, and that it could be equally true. For example, if I'm victimized, then I think of the strength I've gained, and all I've learned from that experience. And so I found it the quickest way to detach from the ego and to, as you talked about, just simply live with contradictions, to exist with the contradictions and be in that space. It's a release. I think it opens our heart. I had that experience lately when I met with a friend for lunch, and I hadn't seen the friend in a year. I was in Las Vegas. We were in a casino, which he loves. Old family friend, used to be a teacher with my mom, in his mid-80s now and on a walker. And we had a really nice time. He has a great sense of humor, been through a hard time. And as we left, his car was parked out on the ground in a parking lot, and I was up in the parking structure. So as I walked up in the parking structure, my thought was, oh, I wonder if I can see my friend Clay from up here. That was the thought. And I looked over the edge, and there he was. And something happened. And I mean, my heart just opened because I saw his suffering. He's walking on the walker. He's just hobbling along. He can barely make it. And it hits me, I don't know if I'll see him again. This old family friend I've known since I was a teenager. And I decided to walk with him. Like, I walked the whole length because his car was parked far away. I walked the whole length of the structure, just saying the Nembutsu and just being in that space of contradiction. And somehow it just opened my heart wide open. And I walked the whole way with him. He didn't see me. I was just holding the space and able to hold those contradictions together. I think it was compassion I was feeling, but it was everything. It was just everything. And I knew it was a good thing. That's all I knew. I don't know if there's a name for that experience, but I've never experienced like that Nembutsu feeling of awe and holding the contradictions of life suffering together. I've never had it for such a sustained period. So anyway, I just think that concept of living with the contradictions is really powerful. So I'm just offering this. Any comments you have would be welcome. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. That's a beautiful story, and I love the way you describe that. It makes me think of the term of suchness, and those moments where everything can be just as it is, allowing the moment to be what it is, and there's no part of you that wants anything to be other than how it is. I love how you describe that. The irony with the analogy of the gardening and particularly weeding is if we want to take this to a whole new level, well, then what is a weed? There's no such thing as weeds, right? A weed is a plant I don't want. But why don't I want it? Well, conditioning told me plant the flower, not that other thing. But at the end of the day, what is a weed? So that the non-duality aspect of, I guess anything could grow here. Who's to say that's not beautiful? That what one day looked like a garden of weeds, maybe I'll tear down the fence and say anything that grows here can grow here. Maybe that's more peaceful than putting in all the effort to say, no, I have to fence it all off and only flowers here and nothing else. That's a whole different way of approaching it. That's a whole nother seminar too. but I love that because that's kind of what you're describing here is just suddenly there can be this moment of maybe everything is perfectly okay just the way that it is. And I think that's what I was trying to hint at with the groundlessness and the openness of here's the situation that we're in. Life is an experience to be had. Everything's changing. Everything is because of something else. Everything is interdependent. And I get to experience it all. I'm just one of the other interdependent things that's here. Or as Alan Watts would say, you're a function of the universe in the way that a wave is a function of the ocean, right? The wave is the ocean. And I am the universe experiencing itself through me at this particular moment in this particular place and space and time. And in that moment, suddenly everything can open up and it's okay. Weed, flower, same thing. They're both beautiful. Let's water it all. Anyway, that's kind of what came to mind as you were sharing. I think that's what those moments feel like, where suddenly everything can just be suchness and vastness and openness, right? There are different ways that this word gets described in different teachings, but that's the overall feeling is suddenly everything's just perfectly okay. Radical okayness, like all of these ideas conjure that feeling that you described. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Any other questions here in the room or on Zoom?
What's a podcast?
Oh, what is a podcast? A podcast is, imagine like a radio show. It's an audio format that you subscribe to it and then episodes show up. Like a TV show has episodes. A podcast is essentially that in audio format. So I have 220 episodes since the day I started it, December 31st of 2015. And each episode will cover a concept or an idea or a story or a teaching, and it's all audio. So you listen in, and it's like, imagine a Dharma talk. It's like listening to a Dharma talk, but there's multiple episodes, so different topics. That's what a podcast is. And you can find these on any topic out there. There are platforms that list all the podcasts, kind of like YouTube does for video. That's what a podcast is, but it's audio. Yes, the website for where I post all of my stuff is secularbuddhism.com. And I host the podcast on there, so you can find all the podcast episodes there.
Just a quick question. It seems that that you have found Buddhism or found the Dharma, but going along with the line of contradictions, could the Dharma have found you?
Yes, I think very much so. In fact, I think about kind of what was shared earlier with it was encountering difficulties that ironically you wish you had never encountered or you wanted to avoid, that leads to a place where later you're like, well, this, I wouldn't be here had it not been for that. And then there's that acceptance of, okay, well, it doesn't mean I like that, but I'm actually glad that happened. And there's like an acceptance of just things as they are, and realizing, well, maybe it found me, maybe I found it, maybe there's no separation. Maybe it's all just suchness. Yeah, I love thinking like that. Thank you.
Maybe if you could share how you originally found Buddhism and Buddhism found you.
Yes. So this was around 2010, and it was just going through the difficulties of life. You know, life is hard sometimes. Navigating relationships are hard. Making sense of your worldview can be hard. And everything came to a head around the same time. It was the culmination of the feeling that life has pulled the rug out from under my feet. And anything and everything that made sense to me suddenly didn't make sense to me. And it was that feeling of the person at the abyss that it's like, oh, that's scary. Oh, I'm actually in it. And now I'm falling. And that moment of panic of realizing the firm foundation that I thought was super firm is not. It's falling with me. And in that moment of panic, I would say it was panic. It was a true existential crisis in every sense of the word. And I started just seeking. I need something firm again, because I thought I had the most firm rock. Everyone's falling, but not me, not my rock. And suddenly, oh yeah, I'm falling too. And I started to, I went into seeker mode. And so with existential questions, when you have an existential question, what you think will solve it is an answer to it, right? Who am I? Why am I here? What happens when I die? All the big questions. I just need an answer. I started seeking, and in that seeking, I listened to a seminar series similar to the one I spoke at last night. It was a university platform that was the meaning of life from the major world traditions. And it was, here's the Christian perspective, the Hindu, the Judaism, Islam, and then the final framework was Buddhism. And all attempting to answer the questions to life's big questions. Ultimately, what is the meaning? And when it got to the topic of Buddhism, it was framed entirely different. It started out with, we don't have an answer to these questions. We're going to flip the script and say, why does that question matter? Like, where does the question come from? Why do you wrestle with the question? And I remember that was a pivotal moment for me. It had never occurred to me that maybe the peace that I was seeking in an answer, another way of achieving that would be not having the question. And I went down the rabbit hole of that line of thought. I thought, I've never thought to approach it that way. I always thought it's about the answer. It never occurred to me that it might be about the question. And that's what Buddhism offered, an approach to say, maybe that question's not relevant. And as I sat through that and learned and read, I just went down the rabbit hole of, give me anything that goes in that direction now. And the more I learned, the more that question lost its power. Suddenly, I remember thinking, I don't know. That's the answer, and I don't have to know. And now, if there's a magic box right here and you get to open it and it has the answer, I'd be like, meh, you can have it if you need it. I'm good. I found a complete sense of comfort in not knowing, and not knowing the big existential things, but also in not knowing on a smaller level, because we deal with that with smaller things too. And for me, that's one of my Shenpa hooks from time to time is, oh, but I need to know that my career, that's solid. Oh, my relationship, that needs to be solid. But none of it is, right? None of it ever is, and it never has been. That's been the illusion all along. So going down the path of trying to become more comfortable with not knowing, more comfortable with uncertainty, more comfortable with the realization that I don't know what piece shows up next. It could be something I don't want at all. Yeah, that's been the game all along. That I found a lot of comfort in that, and that's kind of what led me to Buddhism, or led Buddhism to me, or however I want to think of that. But I'm very grateful to have found a framework that gives me the peace from time to time to think, I can do this. I can play this game of Tetris in life. And I don't know what's coming my way. But meanwhile, I get to enjoy the fact that I'm playing it all. Doesn't mean I have to like it, because yeah, the pieces still show up from time to time, like, oh, I don't want that. That's not what I wanted. But then I remind myself, but I get to play. That's the joy of the game. So.
Oh, Alan?
No, I just appreciate your contribution to I find it extremely interesting that what you've indicated, what you proposed yesterday and today is so compatible with my understanding of Jodo Shinshu and the Nembutsu. People from other, say, Japanese traditions for which they may be reciting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and other kinds of traditional responses. Do they find you acceptable, or is there any sort of conflict at all? Because I don't find that whatever you've done in the last 2 days conflicting with my understanding of Buddhism through the Jodo Shinshu Shinran's eyes.
Yes, in my experience, I found I'd say 99% of interactions with other traditions or schools of Buddhism or people from those traditions to be exactly what you're describing. They say, this complements or helps me understand my practice better. It embodies that I feel like I can be a better whatever I already am, if I am Jodo Shinshu or I am Zen or whatever. It's been rare, I'd say very rare, the 2 or 3 times that someone, and it's usually someone who's not familiar with my work. Usually what will trigger them is the title of the podcast, and they'll reach out without even listening and saying, don't do this, this is appropriating my culture, or this is bastardizing the teachings. And usually I'll say, listen to it, because I'm actually not trying to set up a different type of Buddhism. I'm trying to teach the fundamentals in a way that you could take this and stick with the tradition that makes sense to you. I did this in my career with teaching paragliding too. I had a flight school, a beginner's flight school, and I teach people the basics of how to fly a paraglider. And then they would leave from there and say, well, I want to go learn tricks. You don't teach tricks. I'm, no, I only teach the basics, because I'm not trying to teach that. I'm trying to let's learn the fundamentals. And when you can fly safely, now go to one of the other schools where you learn all the things that you want to do, because the trick pilot will go to that school. The long distance competitive pilot, yeah, you go to that school. But all the basics, that could start here. And that's how I view the podcast. So I don't view it conflicting with any of the traditions, because I don't view it as a separate tradition. It's a come learn basics here. It's a gateway. If this resonates for you, you can either stay here, you could stay where you are, because I have a lot of non-Buddhists who participate in my Sangha, priests from the Catholic Church, rabbis from the Mormon Church, like a lot of different traditions. And they come and they say, oh, this really does help me be a better whatever I already am. So for, like I said, 99% of the engagement and interaction is like what you just described that you felt. It's like, okay, yeah, this works.
Any other questions in the room? Or Cindy.
When you were speaking about the different traditions and people that you've talked to, I'm wondering if you might reflect on whether or not native spirituality may also be in parallel with the podcasts and the people that you may have encountered, and what your thoughts are in terms of the intersectionality that there might be with Native American, and we have here Native Hawaiian spiritual thought.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not super familiar with Native American spirituality. I've touched a little on a lot, especially when I was in that seeker mode. I've always been fascinated by philosophy. So I've sampled to a small degree, a little bit of a lot. What I found with the podcast, again, is I think I have identified in almost every tradition. In fact, I haven't found one yet where someone doesn't find at least one element that they're like, okay, I understand this better now because of the way you explained this. So I think that's the same across probably any of the traditions, because really at its core, the recognizing the interdependent nature of reality and the continual changing of reality, where would you not see that? Like anyone in any tradition could recognize, yeah, that is the nature of how things work. So I usually focus on those very core elements that are universal, and that I found it from any other tradition. When they come in and they learn something from this particular worldview, it can work. It can click. One thing I'll just say real quick I brought up the analogy of the questions and answers. One reason I feel Buddhism fits so well with any other tradition is because a lot of traditions are focusing on the answers. And when you have two traditions of different answers, there you have competition. It's like, no, the answer is this. No, the answer is that. Where Buddhism comes along and says, okay, yeah, the answer, whatever. Let's look at the question. It can be compatible with any tradition that offers answers, because this one's not giving answers. This one's saying, what are the tools to help you be more skillful with asking the question? Maybe to the point where the question becomes irrelevant. So I found that I haven't found another tradition where it's incompatible, because it's just taking it from going a whole different direction with the quest. It's not trying to go here to answer. It's trying to, let's look at the question. So I think because of that, with any other form of spirituality, it would be compatible.
Okay, any other questions here in the room or on Zoom? Oh, yes.
Thanks, Debbie. No, I want to get back to the gardening metaphor, because I know that you do paragliding, you do scuba diving, you have a Buddhist podcast, you've got a career in tech, you've got all these different elements, and I kind of am a little bit curious how you can do all that. One thing I find is, I think a lot of us probably feel overwhelmed at one time or another with all the things, all the demands on us, or all the things we would like to be doing and try to do. And then we kind of find ourselves spread too thin. And maybe we find that some parts of our garden, our multi-plot gardens, are being neglected. And it's kind of I'm just wondering if you could share any insights about that, and how you've kind of prioritized or sometimes let things go. I know you made a decision. You talked in your podcast about basically changing your paying job so that you could spend more time with family. So that was kind of an example, I suppose. But I'm really kind of amazed by what you're able to do, and would be interested in your insights.
Oh, yes. Thank you. The trick is, you see all the balls that are being juggled and you don't see all the ones that are dropping. I would say I'm continually making adjustments to which plates are spinning. Do I keep them spinning? Which ones drop? But there are always plates that are being dropped. I feel like I'm continually making that assessment. So I remember a pretty distinct shift for me in my approach to career and life, where there was a time in my life where it was focused around the sense of identity. I am an entrepreneur. I do this because this is what I think I should be doing. And then there was a shift that happened later where it turned into, well, what would I do if I don't have to do any of it? I could just get to do what I want. And that's when life became more around, okay, well then how could I paraglide more, make that my profession? How can I have fun with the experience? And that's the phase that from that moment till today, that's the phase I'm still in, where I'm trying to constantly evaluate, I don't have to do any of this. So if I don't have to, then what would I do? And I try to do more of the things that I feel are fulfilling for me personally, but also, what has a bigger impact on making the world a better place, because that matters to me too. But the shoulds went away. A lot of the shoulds, I didn't realize how many there were. Like so much of life was about, here's how I should be, here's how I should feel, this is what I should do, here's what I shouldn't do. And now it's so much more about, here's what I get to do, here's what I can do. And now, so when those plates fall, it's not that important. It's like, that one fell, but I've got 3 others spinning here. And it can be stressful managing. The stress of managing, sure, that's real, because there is a lot. I'm in a master's program I started about a month or 2 ago, so let's add another plate on there. And I had to do a whole lot of work the last couple of weeks so that I wouldn't have to do that while I was here. And that was stressful. But it's a different kind of stress when it's about managing busyness versus managing the expectations and the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. Those are a lot deeper. So yeah, I speaking to that concept overall, I feel Buddhism has helped me realize my worldview now is that I am experiencing this life one time from this vantage point. I've never experienced this, and I'll probably never experience it again. In terms of meaning, I believe it's just a blank canvas. It's whatever I put on that canvas, that's the meaning. Rather than finding it, I'm creating it. And what do I get to do with the short amount of time that I get to be alive? I get to do this. This is why when you reached out, it's like, yeah, that'll be fun. I've never been to Hawaii. And I would pay to come do this. Like, so to be able to transition from life is play. What you get it one shot at it. What are you going to do with it? It's like that Mary Oliver quote that says, tell me, what are you going to do with your one wild and crazy life? It's like, that's the burning question that's always in my mind. What am I going to do with this one wild, crazy experience of being alive that I'm having? And not worrying about all the ways that I'm going to fail along the way. What plates will fall, what balls get dropped, because those are happening a lot, all the time. Because I can't do all of it, but I want to do as much as I can because I get to. So, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Then I guess we will bring our session to a close. I want to give a heartfelt and huge mahalo nui loa to Noah for being with us today and for sharing his wisdom and also bringing your beautiful family with you. That was wonderful. I didn't realize that was the first time they had seen you in the presentation, so very wonderful. If you'd like to hear Noah one last time, he will be at Honpa Hongwanji tomorrow morning for their 9 o'clock service. And so I'd like to thank and recognize a few people and entities. First of all, the Hawaii Betsuin for allowing us to hold this session here today. And Cindy Alm, the president of the board, thank you so very much. I'd like to recognize Manoa because they helped us to co-sponsor Noah and his travels here because he did, as we mentioned earlier, he had a class session yesterday afternoon, which was a very nice, well-attended session. I'd like to thank Steve Chinen, our Oahu District Commissioner, for helping me to plan this event. And also a big mahalo to Dave Atchison and Miles Tamura for handling our AV and Zoom management. A fun fact is that Dave was the one that recommended that we reach out to Noah, and he was the one that first made contact. And in addition to enjoying his podcasts, a fun fact is that Dave's wife, Penny, and Noah's wife, Giselle, happen to be from the same hometown, and their families have known each other through the years, so that's really wonderful. So again, thank you to all of you for coming, and a big thank you to my husband, Alan, for helping me with everything and for taking pictures today. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to everyone on Zoom for joining us.
Thank you.